The galaxy was alive with stars, each one burning brightly against the black canvas of space. Ships traveled silently between planets, carrying goods, people, and ideas. But beneath the quiet shimmer of the stars, tensions brewed. Two great powers, the Archi Union and the Terran Coalition, stood on the edge of conflict. Each had grown strong in its own way. Each believed it was right, and neither could risk war. In the heart of the Archi capital, the Council of Elders gathered. Lyra, a young diplomat, sat among them. Her tall, elegant frame and shimmering silver skin marked her as one of the Archi's finest. She had studied diplomacy, history, and the ways of other species, but nothing had prepared her for what the Council now demanded. "Lyra," Elder Chiron said, his voice soft but commanding, "the Council has chosen you for a mission of the highest importance. You will travel to the Terran Coalition and marry Commander Evan Hale." Lyra's eyes widened. She had heard of humans before, tall, unpredictable creatures with strange emotions and untested ways. The Archi had many stories about human warriors. Fierce, stubborn, and dangerous. The thought of being bound to one filled her with fear. I am honored, Elder," Lyra said, her voice steady though her heart raced. "But I have never met a human before." Chiron nodded. "Nor has anyone. That is why you must go. The peace of our worlds depends on this union. You must act with intelligence, courage, and care. But most of all, you must survive." Lyra bowed, her mind already racing with worst-case scenarios. She imagined a human husband who would demand obedience, who might treat her as a possession, who could be cruel or impatient. She had been trained in negotiation, in combat, in the art of persuasion, but never in taming fear. The next days were a whirlwind of preparation. Lyra learned human etiquette, their language, their gestures. Every lesson only heightened her anxiety. Humans smiled in ways that were strange to her. They had gestures she could not always read. They expressed feelings openly, and that openness, Lyra feared, might turn into unpredictability. Finally, the day arrived. Lyra's ship detached from the Archi capital station and set a course for the human flagship, the Terran Starbreaker. She watched as stars streaked past her window and tried to calm her mind. Every tale she had ever heard about humans crowded her thoughts. They were reckless. They were emotional. They were dangerous. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the occasional announcement from the ship's captain. Lyra sat in her cabin, folding her hands, rehearsing the words she might need to speak to the human she dreaded meeting. She imagined confrontation, orders, and strict authority. She imagined fear gripping her chest. At last, the Starbreaker came into view, and shining silver against the darkness. Lyra's pulse quickened. The docking procedure was precise, mechanical, but her thoughts were chaotic. She told herself to remain calm, to remember her training, to be cautious. When the hatch opened, a human officer stepped forward. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. He was tall, yes, but there was something in his eyes that was different from the stories she had heard. There was calmness, patience, and respect. "Welcome, Lyra," he said, his voice clear and steady. "I am Commander Evan Hale. I am honored to meet you." Lyra blinked. He did not demand she bow or speak in a particular way. He did not stare her down or judge her. He simply waited politely, allowing her to respond. I am honored as well." Evan smiled lightly. "Please, come aboard. I will show you to your quarters, and then we can speak at your leisure. You will have your space, your freedom, and your time to adjust. No one here expects anything from you but your comfort and safety." Lyra hesitated, confusion mixing with relief. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever treated her like she had a choice. Slowly, she allowed herself to follow him. The Starbreaker was different from anything Lyra had ever seen. Its corridors were clean, bright, and open. Crew members passed them, offering polite nods. There was no sneer, no whispered judgment, no curiosity that felt threatening. Lyra felt her shoulders relax, ever so slightly. Evan led her to her room, a private cabin with large windows overlooking the stars. The space was simple, but comfortable. "You will stay here as long as you wish," he said. "No one will disturb you, unless you ask." Lyra nodded, surprised by the generosity. She had expected confinement, strict orders, perhaps even cold suspicion. Instead, she found warmth. Even in the small gestures, the way he offered a chair, the way he waited for her to speak first, she sensed something she had never experienced before. "Thank you, Commander," she said softly. "You are welcome, Lyra. Please, do not hesitate to tell me if anything feels wrong. I will listen." For hours, she explored the ship, learning its layout, observing the crew, and trying to understand the humans she had feared. Slowly, she began to see patterns of kindness, patience, and care. The humans were disciplined, yes, but they were also capable of gentleness. As night fell on the bridge, Lyra found herself staring at the stars once more. Fear still lingered, but it was no longer the only feeling in her chest. Curiosity began to grow alongside it. She wondered what the human would be like in private, what his thoughts were, and what lessons she might learn from him. Evan, meanwhile, stood on the bridge, observing the star systems ahead. He had prepared for a difficult meeting with the alien diplomat, expecting resistance, fear, or even anger. Instead, he found a creature cautious but intelligent, hesitant but willing to observe. He knew the journey ahead would require patience and understanding. He also knew that if he treated her with respect and care, he could build trust that no words of diplomacy could achieve. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself a small thought: perhaps humans were not the monsters she had imagined. Perhaps they were something different. Perhaps, with patience and understanding, she could survive this mission, and even learn to respect the human she had feared. The stars stretched endlessly outside the windows. The galaxy was full of unknowns, and Lyra felt both fear and excitement. She did not know what awaited her, but for the first time, she felt the possibility of hope, and hope, she realized, was a stronger companion than fear. That night, Lyra lay in her cabin, listening to the soft hum of the Starbreaker. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, though her mind was full of questions. Questions about humans, about Commander Evan Hale, and about the role she had been chosen to play. She did not yet know the answers, but for the first time, she felt ready to find them. And somewhere on the ship, Evan Hale watched over the stars, quietly preparing for the arrival of an alien he had never met, knowing that the greatest mission was not the political alliance, it was earning trust, one gesture at a time. The galaxy was vast, full of danger and wonder, and two beings, one human, one Orcs, had just begun a journey that could change everything. The Starbreaker glided through space like a silver arrow, calm and silent, carrying its precious cargo across the stars. Lyra's heart was still heavy with doubt, but with each passing hour, she began to notice the difference between expectation and reality. She had expected a human to be harsh, strict, or commanding. Instead, Commander Evan Hale continued to surprise her. The next morning, Lyra woke to soft sunlight filtering through the cabin windows. She had slept longer than she expected, the hum of the ship strangely comforting. There was a knock at the door, gentle but firm. "Lyra, may I come in?" Evan's voice called from the other side. She hesitated. She was still wary, still unsure of how to respond to this human who was supposed to be her husband in name. But curiosity overcame caution. "Enter," she said softly. Evan stepped in with a small smile. He carried a tray with food, something the Archi considered unusual, but not unpleasant. "I thought you might be hungry," he said, placing it on the table. "I understand your people have different diets, so I tried to include some options you might like." Lyra blinked. No one had ever considered her comfort like this. In her society, diplomats were often tools of the council, expected to follow rules, not receive care. Her first instinct was disbelief, but her second instinct, quieter and stranger, was gratitude. "Thank you," she said. "This is thoughtful." Evan nodded. "I do not expect gratitude. I only want you to feel welcome." Quote, I 17:7. For the next few days, Lyra began to explore the Starbreaker under Evan's guidance. Every corridor, every room, every part of the ship seemed designed for efficiency, but also for comfort. Crew members treated her politely, bowing slightly or nodding as they passed. No one stared. No one whispered. They accepted her presence as naturally as if she belonged. Evan introduced her to the crew. "This is Lyra, our guest and partner in the peace mission," he said. "She will be traveling with us for the foreseeable future. Please treat her with respect and kindness." The crew responded with smiles and respectful words. Lyra's fear began to loosen its grip. She had expected suspicion, tension, or even mockery. But instead, she found openness and warmth. One afternoon, Evan invited her to the observation deck. The room was large, with glass walls revealing the endless stars outside. Lyra marveled at the sight. She had seen stars before, but from a moving vessel, they seemed alive, stretching and pulsing in ways that made her feel small and yet part of something greater. Evan stood beside her, his gaze calm. "It is beautiful, isn't it?" he asked. "Yes," Lyra replied softly. "I have never seen it like this." He nodded. "Humans have always been explorers. We look for the beauty in the universe, even when danger waits around the corner. You might find it strange, but it helps us understand ourselves and others." Lyra studied him carefully. There was no arrogance in his tone, no superiority. He spoke simply, clearly, but with a weight that made his words meaningful. For the first time, she felt that perhaps humans were not reckless monsters. As her people had warned, they were different, yes, but capable of understanding, patience, and even care. Over the next week, Evan and Lyra began spending more time together. He taught her about human customs, simple things, like laughter, storytelling, and the way humans express respect. She found it fascinating. Humans had habits that seemed chaotic at first but were rooted in understanding and empathy. Lyra, in turn, shared stories of her people. She told Evan about the Archi traditions, their values, their art, and their ways of thinking. He listened attentively, never interrupting, never dismissing her words. It was as if he genuinely wanted to understand her, not just fulfill a duty. One evening, Lyra found herself laughing at a joke Evan had made. It was a small sound, almost foreign to her ears. She realized she had not laughed freely in years, not since her early training as a diplomat. The sound startled her, but it also filled her with warmth. Evan noticed. "You have a lovely laugh," he said simply. There was no awkwardness, no flirtation, just honesty. Lyra's heart skipped, not with fear, but with surprise. She had expected arrogance, but here was kindness. She had expected indifference, but here was attention. Their growing bond did not go unnoticed by the crew. They began to whisper among themselves, though never unkindly, calling them the bridge between worlds. Lyra found herself feeling a strange sense of pride. For the first time, she felt that she could make a difference beyond mere politics. One day, during a routine check of the ship's outer hull, Lyra and Evan encountered a small meteor storm. Debris floated dangerously close to the vessel, and alarms sounded. Lyra froze, unsure of what to do. Evan grabbed her arm gently. "Stay calm. Watch me," he said. His movements were precise, confident, and careful. Together, they maneuvered the outer pod, avoiding collisions. Lyra realized that humans could be courageous, not through aggression, but through focus and patience. After the storm passed, Lyra's hands shook slightly. Evan noticed immediately. "You did well," he said quietly. "You kept your focus and helped me navigate. That is bravery, in my eyes." Lyra felt something she had never felt before: respect and trust combined. She had always believed courage was about strength or force, but now she saw another kind. Courage through composure and care. The days turned into weeks. Lyra's fear gradually faded, replaced by curiosity, respect, and something she could not yet name. She found herself seeking Evan's guidance not out of obligation, but because she valued his judgment. She began to trust him, and in doing so, she began to trust herself. One quiet evening, Lyra stood on the observation deck, gazing at a distant nebula. Evan joined her silently, and they watched the colors swirl. "You seem different from what I expected," Lyra admitted softly. "I thought humans would be harsh, cold, difficult to trust." Evan shook his head. "Many humans are not perfect, but some of us try to understand rather than control. I believe trust is earned, not demanded. That is what I hope to show you." Lyra looked at him carefully. There was no hidden agenda, no manipulation, just honesty. She realized that this human, who she had feared, was showing her the kind of respect and care no one else ever had. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope. Perhaps this mission could succeed, not just through duty, but through understanding. Perhaps the bond she and Evan were forming could become something more powerful than any treaty or council decree. As the Starbreaker continued its journey, carrying them across the stars, Lyra felt a strange but welcome feeling. Trust. It was new, unfamiliar, and fragile, but it grew stronger with each passing day. And in the quiet of the ship, between the hum of engines and the glitter of distant stars, two beings, one human, one Archi, began a journey not only across the galaxy, but toward each other, learning that fear could be replaced with respect, curiosity, and perhaps even friendship. The Starbreaker traveled through deep space, carrying Lyra and Evan toward the Terran Coalition capital. The days had grown quieter in some ways, yet busier in others. Lyra no longer feared the human she had been ordered to marry. Instead, a cautious respect and something softer had begun to grow in her heart. She found herself observing Evan in moments when he thought she was not watching, noticing the way he treated every crew member with fairness, patience, and genuine interest. It started during a routine diplomatic mission. The Starbreaker had been sent to a neutral outpost to deliver messages of peace and observe local tensions. Lyra accompanied Evan to meet the alien governor, a species known for their suspicion of humans. She expected difficulty. She expected conflict. Instead, Evan acted calmly, listening carefully to every concern, never raising his voice or dismissing any point. Lyra followed his lead, watching how he allowed each speaker time to share their thoughts. Even when disagreements arose, he responded with clarity and fairness, guiding the conversation toward compromise without forcing anyone to surrender their position. Lyra realized she had never seen such leadership. In the Archi Union, power often meant control, not understanding. Evan's strength was not in dominance, it was in respect, patience, and the ability to make others feel valued. She found herself admiring him, not as a commander, but as a human being capable of kindness and wisdom. After the meeting, Evan led Lyra to the observation deck. The stars spread endlessly before them, and the silence of space felt peaceful. "You handled yourself well," he said quietly. You spoke with clarity and confidence. The governor respected you. Lyra shook her head. I only followed your example. You taught me how to listen. Evan smiled faintly. Leadership is listening, more than speaking. You did not just follow. You learned. That evening, they walked through the corridors of the Starbreaker, a quiet camaraderie growing between them. Lyra had begun sharing small details of her life, her childhood, among the silver towers of the Archi capital, her first lessons in diplomacy, the fears she had carried for years. Evan listened, never judging, never offering unwanted advice, only understanding. You have been trained to serve your people, he said softly. But do not forget to serve yourself as well. You are more than a duty. You are a person. Lyra had never heard such words before. They were simple, yet they carried power. In her culture, a diplomat was always a tool, a voice of the council. Personal feelings were secondary to duty. Yet here was a human telling her that her value was not measured by service alone. She felt something stir inside, a sense of freedom she had never known. The days turned into weeks, and Lyra and Evan's partnership began to grow stronger. On missions, they complemented each other perfectly. Lyra's advanced senses and knowledge of alien customs allowed them to anticipate potential dangers, while Evan's calm decision-making ensured that situations were resolved without unnecessary conflict. They became a team, trusted and respected by all who worked with them. One day, they were sent to negotiate a trade route with a distant alien species. The talks were tense. Lyra could sense that the other diplomats were testing them, expecting mistakes, expecting human impatience. But Evan remained calm. He addressed each concern methodically, allowing Lyra to speak when her insights were valuable. Together, they presented a united front, showing not strength through force, but strength through understanding and cooperation. Afterward, Lyra found herself sitting beside Evan on the observation deck once more. The stars reflected in her silver eyes, and she felt a sense of accomplishment. I never imagined humans could be so patient, she admitted. Evan glanced at her. Patience is not weakness. It is a choice. A choice to value understanding over conflict. Lyra nodded. She had learned that lesson well. The more time she spent with him, the more she realized that the humans she had feared were not violent or reckless. They were capable of deep thought, empathy, and care. Their growing bond did not go unnoticed. Crew members whispered quietly, calling them the bridge between worlds. Lyra found herself proud, not just of her own role, but of what they were building together. Their partnership was something rare, something that showed that cooperation, trust, and respect could overcome even the oldest fears and prejudices. One evening, the ship was shaken by an unexpected meteor storm. Debris struck the hull, alarms blared, and the crew rushed to their stations. Lyra's heart pounded as she watched the chaos. Yet when Evan approached her, he did not scold or demand. He simply said, "Stay calm. Focus on what we can control." Together, they helped guide a damaged cargo pod to safety. Lyra marveled at his composure, the way he assessed the situation and acted without panic. Afterward, he looked at her and said, "You did well. You stayed calm, helped me navigate, and kept the pod safe. That is courage." For the first time, Lyra felt true admiration for a human, not for his strength, but for his wisdom, his patience, and his care. She realized that this mission was no longer simply a political duty. It had become a journey of learning, growth, and understanding. Later, when the storm had passed, Evan and Lyra sat quietly on the observation deck. The stars glimmered like scattered diamonds across the black sky. Lyra felt a sense of peace she had never known. "I used to fear humans," she admitted. "I thought you would be harsh, demanding, impossible to understand." Evan shook his head. "Some humans are like that, but not all. Understanding takes time, patience takes effort, and courage Courage is in facing fear without letting it control you. Lyra looked at him, truly seeing him for the first time. He had faced her fear, not with force, but with care. He had shown her a path of respect, trust, and cooperation. And in doing so, he had changed her understanding of humans forever. The Starbreaker sailed on through the endless galaxy. Lyra and Evan continued to work together, side by side, growing not only as a team, but as two beings learning to trust and understand one another. Their bond was quiet, subtle, but undeniable. They began to realize that perhaps this connection built on respect, kindness, and shared experiences was stronger than any political alliance could ever be. And so, in the vast expanse of space, between the hum of engines and the glitter of distant stars, two beings, one human, one Orcs, continued their journey, not just across the galaxy, but into understanding, trust, and a bond that should not have formed, yet was growing stronger with every passing day. Lyra no longer feared the human she had been ordered to marry. She was beginning to respect him, to admire him, and to wonder if the journey ahead could lead to something even greater than peace between worlds. The Starbreaker had been traveling for days through the outer rim of the galaxy. Lyra had grown more comfortable with humans, and her respect for Evan had turned into quiet trust. Together, they had faced storms, navigated difficult negotiations, and learned from each other. Yet even in this time of calm, danger waited, unseen. Deep within the Orcs Union, a faction rejected the peace treaty and resented the forced alliance. They believed that humans were too unpredictable, too emotional, and too dangerous to share power with the Orcs. This group plotted in secret, hoping to disrupt the alliance and blame humans for the failure. One morning, as Lyra prepared for another diplomatic meeting, alarms blared across the Starbreaker. Red lights flashed, and the ship's intercom crackled. "Attention! We are under attack," the voice announced. Lyra's heart jumped. She had never been on the receiving end of aggression before, and the sudden chaos made her feel vulnerable. She ran to the bridge, finding Evan already at the control panel. His expression was calm, steady, and resolute. "Report," he commanded, though his voice was firm without panic. "We've been intercepted by an unknown fleet," the officer replied. "They are armed and approaching rapidly." Evan nodded. "Lock all defensive systems and prepare for evasive maneuvers. Lyra, we need your assistance in scanning their signals. They may be trying to send a false identification to confuse us." Lyra moved quickly, her advanced Orcs senses allowing her to detect subtle irregularities in the fleet's communication patterns. "Commander, their signal is deliberately masked," she said. "They are trying to appear as neutral patrol ships, but they are armed." Evan studied the readings carefully. "Understood. We will not engage until we are certain of their intent. Keep scanning." Quote, quote, quote unquote, quote unquote, quote unquote unquote, quote unquote, quote unquote, quote unquote. As the Starbreaker maneuvered, the unknown ships revealed their colors. They were hostile, their weapons aimed at the vessel. Lyra realized with horror that these attackers had likely learned of her presence and intended to capture her. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. She had been sent as a symbol of peace, but now she was a target. Evan noticed her fear. "Lyra," he said gently, "stay calm. We will face this together. Focus on what you can control, and trust me with the rest." The Starbreaker dodged blasts of energy, each strike sending tremors through the hull. Lyra worked quickly, guiding the ship's sensors to find weak points in the attackers' formation. Evan relied on her insights, coordinating the crew with precision. Together, they avoided the worst of the assault. Yet even as they fought, the attackers' intent became clear. They did not simply wish to harm the ship, they wished to capture Lyra. The knowledge tightened her chest, but she refused to panic. She knew that Evan was counting on her. "Commander, she said, her voice steady. They are focusing on me. If we don't act, they will board the ship. Evan's eyes narrowed. We will not let that happen. He activated the Starbreaker's defensive shields and prepared the boarding defenses. I will go after them if necessary, he said, though his tone remained calm. We must protect you, Lyra. For the first time, Lyra realized the depth of his courage. He did not act out of anger or aggression, but out of care. He had promised her safety, and he intended to keep it. The enemy launched a boarding pod, speeding toward the Starbreaker. Lyra guided the crew to intercept it, using her Archai abilities to anticipate the attacker's movements. Evan moved alongside her, not as a commander giving orders, but as a partner, trusting her instincts and working together as a team. When the pod finally breached the outer hull, Evan and Lyra were ready. They faced the intruders calmly, evading attacks and using non-lethal force to disable the aggressors. Lyra marveled at his skill. He was precise, careful, and always aware of the lives involved, even the attackers. After the fight, the intruders were captured, and the Starbreaker resumed course. Lyra's chest heaved with relief. She looked at Evan, realizing something profound. This human, who she had feared, distrusted, and expected to be harsh, had risked himself for her, without hesitation. You saved me, she whispered. Evan shook his head. We saved each other, he said gently. You guided me through the attack. You were brave. Courage is not just in strength, it is in facing fear and acting anyway. Lyra's silver eyes shimmered with something she had not allowed herself to feel before: gratitude, admiration, and a growing sense of trust. She realized that humans were not what her people had warned her to fear. They were capable of honor, patience, and care in ways the Archai rarely experienced. As the Starbreaker continued its journey, Evan contacted the Council of the Archai Union to report the attack. The revelation shocked the Council. They had feared human unpredictability. Yet, it was the humans who had preserved Lyra's safety. The Council began to question their assumptions and reconsider the value of trust between species. For Lyra, the experience changed everything. She had been sent as a political tool, fearful and reluctant. But now she saw herself as more than a symbol. She had acted with courage, intelligence, and care. And Evan had acted with honor and protection, showing her that humanity's strength was not only in weapons or strategy, but in compassion and understanding. That evening, Lyra and Evan stood together on the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before them, silent witnesses to their ordeal. Commander, Lyra said softly, I thought humans were dangerous. I thought I would have to fear you. But now, I see something different. You care. Evan looked at her, his expression gentle. Care is a choice, Lyra. Strength without care is meaningless. I will always act to protect those I value. And I value you, not because of orders, not because of duty, but because you are worthy of respect and trust. Lyra felt a warmth in her heart that she had never known. Fear had been replaced by trust, and trust by a deep admiration. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope not just for the success of the mission, but for the possibility of a partnership based on respect, understanding, and mutual care. The Starbreaker sailed onward, carrying two beings who had faced danger together, survived, and grown stronger for it. Their bond was no longer just political. It was personal, forged in courage and trust. And in the quiet of space, between the hum of the ship and the distant glow of stars, Lyra realized something she had never imagined. The human she had feared could be the one who showed her the true meaning of strength, honor, and kindness. In that moment, she understood that the greatest battles were not always fought with weapons, but with patience, trust, and courage. and together, she and Evan had already won that battle. The Starbreaker glided smoothly through space, its engines humming softly. The storm of the past days, the attack, the danger, and the uncertainty was behind them. Yet Lyra knew that the journey ahead was just as important. Peace between the Archi Union and the Terran Coalition would not survive without trust, and trust required time, patience, and courage. Lyra had changed. She no longer feared humans, nor did she see them as unpredictable creatures. She had come to respect their strength, admire their courage, and understand their capacity for care. Most of all, she had come to understand Evan Hale not as a human to be wary of, but as a partner, a guide, and perhaps something more. Evan, meanwhile, had observed her growth with quiet admiration. Lyra had not only adapted to human ways, she had shown intelligence, patience, and bravery that matched any humans. He realized that the bond between them was no longer just political, it was personal, built on trust and mutual respect. The Starbreaker approached the Terran Coalition capital. Flags of multiple species waved from the surface stations, and diplomatic vessels moved in coordinated patterns. Lyra felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was the heart of the coalition, the place where decisions of peace would be formalized. Evan placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Are you ready?" he asked. Lyra looked at him, and for the first time, she did not feel fear. "Yes," she said. "I am ready." They disembarked together, walking through the grand halls of the coalition's capital. Dignitaries from countless species looked on as the human and Archi representatives approached the main chamber. This moment had been months in preparation. Yet it was clear that it was more than a ceremony. It was a test of trust, unity, and understanding. In the chamber, the Archi Council and the Terran leaders awaited them. Lyra stepped forward, her silver skin gleaming under the light, and Evan beside her, standing tall and calm. The council nodded in acknowledgement, their expressions serious but approving. "Lyra, Commander Hale," one of the Archi elders said, "you have represented our people with courage and wisdom. You have faced fear, danger, and uncertainty. Your actions have shown that trust is possible, even across the greatest divides." The Terran leader, a human named Ambassador Collins, spoke next. "You have both demonstrated that cooperation is stronger than conflict. Today, your partnership is not only symbolic, it is proof that understanding and respect can unite worlds." Lyra felt a rush of pride, not for herself alone, but for the bond she had built with Evan. They had faced storms, attacks, and fear together. They had shown that humans and Archi could rely on each other, not out of duty, but because they chose to. After the speeches, the council formally recognized the marriage as a symbol of peace. Lyra had expected this moment to feel forced, ceremonial, and distant. Yet as she looked at Evan, she realized something profound. This was no longer about duty. It was about choice. Evan leaned slightly toward her, his voice soft. "Lyra, nothing here is required. This ceremony does not bind you unless you wish it. Your choice matters, and I respect that." Lyra's eyes widened. In her culture, duty often outweighed personal feeling. Here, a human was giving her freedom, the kind of freedom she had never experienced before. She thought of the days on the Starbreaker, of the calm he showed in danger, the patience he gave in learning, the respect he offered in every gesture. Slowly, a smile formed on her lips. "Then I choose," she said, her voice steady. "I choose to stand with you. Not because of orders, but because of what you have shown me. Kindness, courage, and respect." Evan's eyes softened, and he extended his hand. "Then I am honored." The chamber erupted in applause, not just for the ceremony, but for what it represented. A union of worlds built on understanding, trust, and care. Crew members from the Starbreaker, Diplomats from multiple species, and Archae and Terran officials all shared the moment, knowing that something rare and valuable had been forged. Later, as the ceremony concluded and guests began to depart, Lyra and Evan walked to the observation deck of the capital's tallest tower. The city below shimmered with lights, but their attention was drawn to the stars beyond. The vast galaxy stretched endlessly, full of possibilities, dangers, and wonders yet to discover. "You have changed how I see humans," Lyra admitted softly. "I feared you, yet you taught me courage without force, patience without weakness, and care without obligation." Evan smiled. "And you have shown me that courage is not always loud, and wisdom is not always spoken. Together, we are stronger than we would be alone." For a long moment, they stood in silence, watching the stars. Lyra felt a sense of freedom she had never known. She realized that her journey had not been just about diplomacy or peace treaties. It had been about discovering trust, respect, and the power of partnership. "Do you think the galaxy will believe in our story?" she asked, a playful note in her voice. Evan chuckled softly. "Some will doubt. Some will fear. But those who see the truth will understand. Our story is proof that humans and Archae, working together, can achieve more than fear and conflict ever could." Lyra turned to him, her silver eyes reflecting starlight. "Then let's make sure our future is built on that truth, not just here, but across the stars." Evan nodded, taking her hand gently. "We will face the galaxy together, not as symbols, but as partners. And, together, we can show that the greatest strength is compassion, understanding, and trust." As they stood side by side, the city lights below and the stars above, Lyra felt hope fill her chest. Fear was gone. Doubt was gone. What remained was something stronger than any duty or order. A bond, chosen freely, forged in courage, nurtured with care, and destined to face whatever the galaxy might hold. In the distance, ships moved across the night sky, carrying messages, travelers, and explorers. Lyra and Evan knew their journey was far from over. There would be challenges, conflicts, and moments of doubt. Yet now, they faced the future together, confident in the strength of their partnership and the humanity and Archae spirit that had carried them this far. And so, a story that began with fear and uncertainty ended with choice, trust, and hope. Lyra had once feared the human she was ordered to marry. But through patience, courage, and kindness, he had shown her a way to see humans not as threats, but as allies, partners, and friends. And in turn, she had learned to trust, to respect, and to believe not just in one human, but in the greater possibility of understanding across worlds. The Starbreaker waited silently in orbit, a symbol of the journey they had undertaken. And together, Lyra and Evan stepped forward into a galaxy full of unknowns, ready to meet it, side by side.